Ladies and gentlemen, well, look, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm delighted to have you with us this evening. Look, the sun is shining outside, it's beautiful. And, you know, I was wondering whether anyone was going to show up, but here you are. It shows you guys are hardcore. And I love that. It's brilliant because we've been talking, haven't we, about all those things that make you successful so that one day you can look back and you can kind of say, you know, I made it in some way. I kind of climbed that. I climbed my own mountain. And remember, we've talked about how to become world-class. We talked about the idea of 10,000 hours, that you don't just wake up one day and kind of know what you're doing. You've got to put in the hours. I think it's what Jeff Bezos calls, he says, gradatim ferociter, step by step ferociously. So it's just one foot in front of another. We talk about failure and learning from that. And with my guests, I'm always talking to them, not just about how they've made it and why they're so successful, but also the downs, the days when they got up and the day was terrible. How did they handle that? What did they do? The whole idea about learning to execute, do what you say you're going to do, deliver on the promise, do the right thing, have values. And I'm going to be talking to my guest Tracy this evening all about the business of having values and the idea of doing the right thing. Because, you know, when I started 30 something years ago, it wasn't really about that. I mean, you sort of were expected to do the right thing, but no one talked about it and no one really had values, and not in the way that we kind of, you know, we talk about it today. But anyway, all that is to come, and I am going to introduce you to one of my favorite people in the industry. Tracy is absolutely fantastic. I've known her now for, it feels like 20 something years, and I've followed her on her journey and kind of admired from afar what she's done in the way she's created and built this extraordinary organization, PIC, or Pensions Insurance Corporation. It's just an incredible thing that she has created. She's got a great team, but you have to pick that team, and she's done that. So let me tell you a little bit about Tracy. She's CEO. She is not just CEO, she's director. She's a director of Pension Insurance Corporation. And the purpose, so what does PIC even do? And you know what, actually, rather than me telling you, I'm going to ask Tracy to tell you all about it. So why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you have the CEO tell you? But in addition to that, let me tell you a little bit more about Tracy, because she is a member of the Wellcome Trust's Investment Committee. She's an advisory council member on the Diversity Project, which is an amazing platform. She is trustee and honorable treasurer of the Elton John AIDS Foundation. I told you she was interesting. And areas of particular interest, the stuff that she really cares about as well, is the purpose of finance. Like, what's it about? Are we just there to make money for our customers? Or is there more to life than that? Is there some purpose? Is there some bigger thing that we're trying to achieve? And if so, what is that? Anyway, it's a project and it's seeking to redefine the social contract with financial services and diversity. So look, there is no one better than Tracy Blackwell, who is coming to talk to us today. And Tracy, I know you are like one of the busiest people in the industry. So for you to give up your time and come and talk to us, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then just tell us a little bit about PIC and Pensions Insurance Corporation first. Let's start there. What does this incredible company actually do? And then we'll come on to you.
Yeah, very happy to. And I'll apologize in advance because my dog's in here. If she starts barking, I'm going to need to let her out. She's
no problem.
Follows me everywhere. It's long story, sorry. These things we have to deal with in lockdown. So PIC, Pension Insurance Corporation, what we do is we help companies de-risk by taking on their defined benefit pension schemes. And defined benefit pension schemes are the old style pension schemes that companies had where the employees would be enrolled in the pension scheme, and then when they retired, the company and the pension scheme would look after them and pay them their pension until they died, which is great and very beneficial thing to do both for companies and for employees. The problem is the successive legislation has made it completely uneconomic for companies to have these types of pension schemes. There's still lots of them out there. It's a very big market. But the only way for a company to actually divest itself of that pension scheme is for us to for an insurance company to take it on. So that's what we do. We take over the pension schemes. We started out in 2006, and we started with 5 of us in a room, and now we have about 400 people, £50 billion balance sheet, and we look after about 300,000 pensioners. So it's an ever-growing part of the market. It's kind of there she goes. It'll never stop growing, but yeah, it's a fun place to be.
Absolutely brilliant, Tracy. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, you might
hold on, I'm getting rid of the dog. 1 second.
Yeah, that's no problem.
I knew that was going to be a mistake.
No. This is real. This is real life. This is good. So you, ladies and gentlemen, you might have heard Tracy just mentioning some of those numbers out there, right? A ton of pension funds, 50 billion. I mean, just the numbers are just astronomical. And 2006 is an interesting year because that's the year that we, you know, Rob Gardner and I set up Reddington. Yeah, because lots of people try to set up companies. You remember that, right? And especially in what you tried to do, you were not the only kids on the block, right? As I recall, Tracy, there were like, do you remember? I'm not going to say the names, but there were like a whole bunch of different, you know, people came together to say maybe we can do this thing where we insure pensions or build this, you know, build this company that will help us insure pension funds. And only like maybe two have made it, and you guys are super successful. And I'd love to understand, let's go back to the beginning. So 2006, 5 of you in a room, and what did you know about building an insurance company that was going to insure pension funds?
Nothing. Knew absolutely nothing. What I did know is how to invest, because I you know, spent many years in markets, and so was an investor first and foremost, but knew nothing about setting up an insurance company.
So here you are, you decide to, but I mean, look, so tell us about it. What made you think you could do it? And this is a phenomenal story because lots of people think, well, you kind of need to be an expert before you become an entrepreneur. But that business of being an entrepreneur, what were the crucial ingredients, do you think? I mean, what was it that enabled you with 4 other people to sit down and say, let's do this?
Well, it's because I mean, it's as boring as legislative changes. I mean, you know, certain things happen, and I think we've seen it in the last year with COVID, where people have had to be creative and create businesses where there wasn't anything because the situation has changed. And I think it was the same with when we started PIC. You know, there's something very anodyne called the Pensions Act 2004 that changed the whole legislative landscape, and we saw an opportunity that, you know, when you looked at the maths, when you looked at the logic of it all, it was only going to be one-way traffic, and there was no question this is going to be big. It was a question of when it was going to be big, and it did take slightly longer than we thought it was going to do, but that's okay. And so, you know, part of being an entrepreneur, and the people I'm, you know, other people have, I just think it's amazing some of the ideas people have out there when they see a particular opportunity and they just jump on it. And you might not know what you're doing. That's kind of okay. You can always find people who understand how to set up an insurance company, or how to do the accounts, or how to invest. It's bringing them all together and getting the funding to be able to do it that makes the difference. But the whole thing is being creative and having the ideas and seeing the opportunities. That's what really makes it.
And I mean, it's sort of being able to vision cast, as they say. Like you must have sat there and thought, so there's been this change in the law, which means that this is going to happen. And if this happens, then that's going to happen, which means that there's a space in the market to do that. So that's the first skill, right? You've got to be able to work out a few pieces in the chessboard, but then you've also got to have the courage to say, and even though I've never done this thing before, I'm going to have a go. I'm going to give a go. And you've got to be able to persuade people to back you and to say, you know, I like that idea and I think you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always kind of been of the, I've never planned anything in my life. It's just kind of happened sort of thing. And so, and you kind of have to have that sort of attitude when you're doing something like this, because if you have quite set expectations about how things should go and how it should work, you know, then you're never really going to do anything like this. But if you're quite flexible and say, look, I'm going to give it a go. It might work. It might not work. That's okay. I'm okay with that. Yeah. Then you have much more possibility of it actually working. Definitely.
And Tracy, now look, I want to know a little bit about your journey, because I'm going to point out the obvious, which is that you're a woman.
Yeah.
And there are not many women in our industry who have done what you've done, which is to sit in a room with literally a blank sheet of paper and just basically make stuff happen. I mean, I like, we're talking like very, very few, but you've done it, and you are like, pretty much, you are one of a handful who've done it. You're super successful. Everyone points to you as the way to go. This is like, you know, look what Tracy Blackwell's, you know, managed to do. And I know it's a team. I get that it's a team. I know it's not all just you. I get that. But, you know, you're the leader of the pack and so on. What was your journey like, and how did you come to this place where 2006 you did this thing? I mean, what was your journey, and a little bit of background before that?
Yeah, the background's, I think, quite important, because So I didn't have a normal upbringing. I think, for anybody who's read kind of the articles, I was the product of a single mother who had me when she was 18. She was a senior in high school in America. And so I didn't kind of have the same. And I remember once, because I worked at Goldman for 10 years, that somebody was talking about pedigree. There's always a pedigree. I didn't have any of that. And that kind of helps because there's no expectations actually. And which is why I've never kind of planned anything. I've just kind of fallen into things. And it's not without some calculation in terms of thinking, I want to do something interesting and I want to do something exciting and I want to do something different. That's all there, but it was never kind of planned for me either. So I grew up outside of Chicago, single mother, went to university in the US, had to work full time and go to school full time to kind of pay my way through university. I think it's similar here now in terms of how much it costs, but then back in the US, it's an expensive proposition, and we didn't really have any money. And so after I graduated from university, I went on something called an ISEC traineeship, and ISEC is kind of an international business exchange program that's in many, many countries around the world. And I ended up going to Malaysia and working for a software company there. And then I went and did an MBA in Holland, and then ended up at Goldman way back at the very beginning of derivatives days, when derivatives were first new and swaps were first new. And now it's kind of par for the course, but it just shows you how long ago it was. And I was at Goldman for 10 years, and it was a great training ground. But I think one of the things I found was it really didn't suit my values. It wasn't really me. I didn't really fit in. And the fact that I stuck it out for 10 years is something of a miracle, if you ask me. But it was a great training ground, and I learned an enormous amount, and that was great. And then actually, I left Goldman, left the industry altogether, and said, I'm never doing this again. Until 3 years later, when some ex-colleagues came to me and said, look, we're starting this business. Do you want to consider doing it with us? And I thought, well, why not? So I joined, and the rest is kind of how we've gotten here.
Just the most phenomenal story, and it will resonate with a lot of people who watch this, because not everybody, in fact, dare I say it, very few of us come with pedigree, right? I grew up in West Africa. I had a Ghanaian father, an English mother. It was all very kind of, back in pre-civil rights. I was born 8 days before Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. All that whole kind of, that whole piece. And so we don't come with pedigree. And so I love talking to people who don't come with pedigree to the party, right? Because that is just, that is real kind of fuel to inspire people who say, well, I don't have pedigree. And a lot of people have this imposter syndrome, which is, if I don't have the pedigree, then maybe I'm not supposed to be here. If that's something you've ever wrestled with, that whole...
All the time, I still do. You say things like, people look up to me and I go, what are you talking about?
They do.
Why?
They do. Tell me a little bit about, because growing up, you're the child of a single mother and you have to work. I mean, do you feel that framed your approach to life? We talk about grit. It's easy to say grit and resilience and that whole thing about perseverance and having to sit there and figure stuff out, which is no one's going to pay my school fees, right? No one's going to. It's only me, right? So what am I going to do? Did that in some way, do you think, has that informed your approach to life? Grit, steeliness, resilience?
I'm assuming it must have. Yeah. Nothing came. I had to do everything. I always have. And so I just kind of get on with things. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. And that's okay. You got to try everything. And I think the other thing it's done is really instill in me that, I'm grateful for everything. I just feel incredibly lucky by everything all the experiences I've had and everything I've done and, everything I've built. I just feel incredibly grateful to be able to have done that. And I think that's, a lot of people who have had different paths, I think, than that have had the pedigree. I just don't think they necessarily feel as grateful as maybe people who've had to really work for it. Work for it too.
Yeah, I mean, look, I completely agree. And look, it's funny, isn't it? You were talking about your Goldman days, and I remember, of course, we were friends back in those days, and so isn't it funny that if you go back to, let's say, I don't know, let's say 2000 and 2003, when we were both doing our thing, I was at Merrill Lynch and you were at Goldman, you never would have thought, would you, that, hey, 18 years from now, we both have been involved in building and creating, companies that in many ways have changed the game for the pensions industry.
Absolutely.
Which just goes to show that you can't tell, right? You can't plan everything, like you say, right? You
can't plan anything.
Yeah, you can't plan anything, right? You've got to, the opportunity is there, and you've got to know what an opportunity looks like. Like, that's an opportunity. Let me go.
Exactly.
Yeah, let me go and do that thing. So you sort of said, look, some days have been uncomfortable, some days have been good days, and some days it's pretty, some days it's ugly. What does ugly look like, and what does a day look like where maybe over the last 15 years, because like Reddington, we set up in 2006 as well. There have been days that have been amazing and days which are like, I never want to see a day like that again. What were some of those days like, and how did you cope with those?
Well, that's a good question. Let's see. So there was obviously the financial crisis.
Yeah,
so we started in 2006, and then the financial crisis hit. I mean, the funny thing is, we had taken decisions where, because we were investors first and foremost, we could see what was happening in the market, and it was ridiculously expensive, where we said, we're just going to sit it out. We're not going to write any business. We're going to do anything here because we don't want to have money that we have to invest. So we sat it out, and that was actually kind of okay. There were other uncomfortable days. So when we first set up, we had two lines of business. One line of business was taking over companies and running their pension schemes. That was an incredibly bad idea from one part of our team, and that that was deeply uncomfortable. How do you get through it? You just put one foot in front of the other. Recently we've had some other things recently where markets move against you, and you just take a deep breath. Part of it is having the right systems in place, risk systems, understanding that, if it goes wrong, it can't go too horribly wrong. But that's really uncomfortable. It's always uncomfortable having to part with people who have been a great part of the business. But as a business grows, it's different people for different times. So people who are absolutely brilliant at being at the forefront of building a new business and being in the infant stage aren't so great at being part of a company that's all grown up and needs to behave like an adult. So it's there's lots of them. Part of it is just knowing what the right thing is to do and saying, look, everything I'm doing is for the good of the business, and that's what's important. And if I'm uncomfortable, it's kind of painful, it's for the good, it's for the greater good. I think that's what really keeps you going and grounded, and kind of going, right, it's for the greater good. And that helps.
And so let me give you a scenario. So you come in, you've got your coffee, you've got your croissant, and it's 7 o'clock in the morning, and you're sitting there at your desk, and you're like, okay, so what's my day look like? And then suddenly someone walks in and says, Tracy, we've got a problem. And
happens all the time.
Oh, happens all the time. Okay, but this is a particularly big problem. Like, this is chief executive level problem.
Yeah.
It's a real headache. How do you deal with that, right? Because there's a spectrum from, oh, this cannot possibly be happening to me, this is a disaster, all the way through to, okay, let's sit and work this thing out. So how do you deal with big problems that you weren't expecting? It's what sometimes in our industry we call a black swan event, right? It's something you didn't even know that thing was there. Like, how can this be a boom, it comes out of nowhere? How do you deal with big stuff that just arrives on your desk, bang? Like, what's your framework?
Well, let's be clear that underneath whatever you put on top and everything you do, there is the, I cannot believe this has happened, you are kidding me, that's underneath. And so that's all going on, but you can't put that face on. You can't put the face on, which is, I'm going to kill someone. if something's gone wrong, you have to go, okay, right, what are we going to do to fix it? First of all, let's get all the facts on the table. Let's figure out what's actually happened. Facts, what's actually happened. And once funnily enough, once you work through things, if you've had the right systems in place, if you've had the right risk management in place, if you've actually got people so they're thinking about doing the right thing and have the right values in place, you very rapidly come to the conclusion that nothing is that bad. Because you've done the preparation at the beginning. So, you know, the famous saying, time spent in reconnaissance is seldom wasted, is absolutely true. You know, if you've done all of that.
I love that. That sounds great. What was that again?
Time spent in reconnaissance is seldom wasted.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
And so if you put everything in place at the beginning, then when something, because stuff goes wrong all the time. Stuff happens, you know, that's just the way it is. But if you put in place all of the controls, all the systems, all the risk management, you know, the people doing the right thing, if you do all of that, then it's always there, and you're pretty okay.
Yeah. So you just talked about putting the right systems in place, which is what you've got to do, of course. And of course, we're heavily regulated, so you don't just make it up. There's a way you've got to do all this stuff. And especially if you're an insurance company, oh boy, you guys get looked at very, very intensively, particularly if you're going to go to a pension fund and say, you know what, we're going to run the pension fund. And in fact, we're going to run lots of pension funds. You really have to know what you're doing from a systems perspective. Totally get that. And you've got to have the right amount of capital, which is the financial backing, all of that. But it's more than that, isn't it, Tracy? It's also about having the right people in place. So yeah. Tell me a little bit about the types of people who thrive in your firm. It's been 2006 to now, 15 years. You must have seen, you've seen every type of...
I've seen everything.
And you've worked in investment banks before that, and you've done a lot of stuff. So what kind of person thrives at a firm like yours? What are you looking for?
So it's funny. It used to be when we hired people, you know, it was small enough that I could do the final interview, final chat with everyone before they came in and said, look, and the talk I would give is, look, if you're coming from a big organization where there's lots of politics and it's, you know, very sharp elbowed and all of that sort of stuff, I'd say this is the wrong place for you. That's not what we need. What we need is people who are collaborative. We really do work as a team, people working together to work as a team, that they're open, they're transparent, and they want to do the right thing. You know, it really is about doing the right thing. And then what happened with us is, as the organization, so it's fine when we had 20 of us, it was even fine when we had 50 of us, but then it got a bit more tricky. So what we did, and this was actually quite a long time, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, we got all of the employees, we put them into focus groups and had them come up with what they thought our values were. And so you know, a lot of people talk about values and writing down values, and usually it's from the top and somebody makes it up and it's all fine and it's all the good stuff. But we actually had our employees tell us what they thought the values were, which was great, because it actually aligned with what, you know, management thought the values were, which is quite lucky, I think, you know. Yeah. And we wrote it all down, and then we used those values. And we didn't use words like integrity. We used words like doing the right thing. Yeah. We didn't use words like innovation. You know, it was striving to be the best. So, you know, we put it in words that came from our employees, and actually that's put us in really good stead. You know, in the next lot of people we brought in. It's getting trickier now, especially, you know, in the last year we've hired 70 people during COVID. So people where we've never met and we're just meeting them now. So you know, it's going to be harder really instilling that in people. We got lots of training. We do some great people who do some great training stuff on all of this, but it's trickier the bigger the organization gets, and we're learning all the time as well.
Yeah. And presumably the benefit of having values is what? Is it that you can then, when people join, you can say, kind of, this is how we do things around here. So if you want to work here, this is the rule, this is a playbook. So if you know, we respect people, we value all that sort of thing. Is that?
It's partly that. It's partly for when people come in. It's partly when you're assessing people against a job. You know, they might be great at the job, but if they're a nightmare to work with, you don't want them in the organization. It's also when we're doing things like appraisals at year end, and kind of, so somebody again might be great at the job they're doing, but if they're actually rubbing everybody up the wrong way, or not doing it in a way that makes their colleagues feel valued, then it's a good structured way to provide them with feedback about where it's kind of going wrong and what they might be able to do to work on it. So we use it in lots of different ways, actually.
And tell me a little bit about the feedback process, because feedback is something you hear about it everywhere. Feedback. Let me give you some feedback. And feedback is always interesting. When you hear feedback, you're like, oh no, here we go. But I mean, feedback is super valuable because in there is the distilled wisdom that you need to become a better person, right? So how does feedback work in your company? And have you ever had to have feedback, and have you given feedback, and how does feedback work?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. So yes, we do. Of course, when we have appraisals at year end, or when something's not going so right, or when things are going right, you know, we need to tell people as much about what's going right as what isn't going right, and that's really important. You know, I think I also learned I have a 14-year-old son, and they, you know, they tell you early on, especially with boys, I don't know why boys are different, but they are, that for every negative thing you say to them, you need to say 8 positive things.
Yeah, so, tell us positive. That's all we know. That's all right.
Yeah,
it's a boy thing.
It's a boy thing. I don't know why, you know. So I'm constantly but I realize, well, you know, with my more grown-up employees, it's not dissimilar actually. You know, okay. But when you're doing appraisals or feedback with people, it's quite interesting because you might say 10 positive things about them, and then, you know, it's the negative thing at the end of the appraisal, and all they can focus on is the negative thing. But I think it's really important for everyone, including ourselves, to take on board feedback and to incorporate it and really think about it. Yeah. I mean, some of it, to be honest, I've had lots of I have feedback all the time. It's always the same, which is I don't suffer fools gladly, and you know, I can't tolerate, you know, that sort of thinking. Yeah, I'm not really going to change, and I know what my problems are, right? It's just a question of whether I can be bothered to change it or not, and sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. You know.
No, I hear you. So what would you say to our, you know, to our crew who are watching this and are trying to figure out how to be their best selves in these internships, which are like starting now? I mean, they're literally going into now. They want to be amazing. They want to end up a Tracy. They want to end up doing amazing things. Any kind of feedback? What would you say to people who are just saying, so, you know, some of it's obvious, but if there's any learnings that you've taken on board yourself over the you know, the last however many years you've been in business, what do you wish you'd known and implemented yourself, do you think, from the get-go?
Oh gosh, I think I would have you know, coming in as an intern, I think being up for anything and kind of getting your hands dirty, and kind of, even if you don't know what you're doing. God, I remember the first day I started at Goldman, one of my colleagues gave me a really simple math problem to do. And actually, I think I was so in awe of the whole thing and kind of I couldn't do it. I mean, I literally couldn't do it. I must have spent 2 hours trying to figure this out, and I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah. And actually, you know, you kind of go, you eventually put your hand up and go, look, I just need some help. Yeah. Because people aren't, you know, going in, you're not going to be expected to know everything. You're not going to know everything. The whole point is about exposing you to different things and seeing what works and what doesn't, and not everything's going to work. You know, you're going to be really, some things you're going to be great at, and other things you're going to be really terrible at, and that's okay. You know, you need to find your strengths and find what you, not only what you're good at, but what you really want to do and what you love doing. And hopefully those two things coincide, but not always. But you know, stay true to what part of it also is staying true to what you want to do and what you like doing. And if it doesn't suit you and it's not something you want to do, that's okay. Just say, you know, it's not for me.
So here's a really interesting point that you make, because I started life as a lawyer, and then I kind of morphed into an investment banker, and then I moved to a pensions kind of, you know, pensions consulting guy. You know, I've done it just all manner of things, and like you, I've seen an opportunity, and then I thought, that looks interesting. Let me go over there, see what I can do. And I've loved, not quite every minute of it, but I've loved a lot of it. But if I looked back now, 34 years in, I never would have dreamt that I'd have ended up kind of co-creating a pensions investment consultancy. Like, that was not, when the drop-down menu of things when I was 24, that was not on that list, but I ended up doing that thing. And I'd love to get your take on this question of, how do I know what I'm destined for? How did you know you were, I mean, did you know that you were going to set up a pensions insurance corporation? I mean, how do you know that? Is it about passion? How do you learn on the, I mean, tell me how do you, just people kind of always say, how do I know where I'm best suited to do my thing? Is there like, there's some light come on? How do I figure it out? What would you say?
Oh, that's easier. Right. You know, it's not about, should I start a pension insurance company? I mean, it doesn't matter what that is. What's important is understanding what you're good at and what really what really thrills you. You know, I've often talked to people about going into investment banking or asset management, and there's just different types of roles. So if you're very outgoing and like talking to people, then a salesperson or an investment banker, you know, that's constantly client facing, constantly talking to clients. You know, if you love markets and how they work, and you know, you're quite mathematical, then trading is that bit. If you love really analyzing something like down to, you know, the last little bit, then actually being an asset manager, portfolio manager, that sort of thing, that's what you do. So it's kind of understanding yourself. I think what's really important about all of this is understanding yourself and understanding what you like doing and what you don't like doing. So I remember at one stage at Goldman, you know, I was trying to figure out what to do next, and I moved around to a number of different departments, and I can't remember what the job was, but I got an opportunity to go and do something, and I knew it wasn't me. I would have been miserable. You have to stay true to yourself and say, look, I know I'm good at this bit, i.e. talking to people or selling to people. I know I'm not so good at that bit, you know, and actually just being true to yourself. Otherwise, because you're not going to be able to make it up. Let's put it that way. When you get into a role and it's really not going to suit you, you're definitely not going to be able to make it up.
Yeah, and one thing, I totally agree with that. And I mean, the other thing, of course, is that sometimes you don't know when you're just starting out what you're really good at.
Oh, definitely.
You've got to be tested and tried in the fire of life and work before you really figure out, you know what, I'm actually quite good at that thing that I never thought I was going to be any good at. Actually, it turns out I'm better at that than I am at that, which is what I kind of thought. So I would say, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this and you're thinking, I don't know, how do I know whether my destiny is pensions insurance or consulting? You don't know, but you've just got to do what you can do and what you get asked to do to begin with, and do it amazingly. And look, a lot of it, by the way, is, let's talk about this, is 10,000 hours, right? It's just that one thing. Turn up, do your thing, and just get better and better at it, right? I mean, with that,
I think there's especially with this generation and the generation before it, I think there's a tendency, and I don't know, it's because of how everybody goes through school or what, to think, I'm going to come in and I'm going to make this enormous difference straight away, and if I don't, I'm a failure, which isn't the case at all. You know, this stuff, it takes a long time to build up, you know, the expertise and the knowledge and all of that sort of stuff to make you really, really good at some of this stuff. And you can't shortcut that. And I know a lot of people want to shortcut it, and they think, you know, I often get some younger people who go, you know, kind of, they want to run the company tomorrow sort of thing. But actually, you need to put in the hours and the hard yards, because that's how you learn. And it's not that the people are trying to hold you down. It's just, we've all been there and understand, actually, there's a lot more to experience than just, you know, understanding the numbers, so to speak. There's lots of things that go into it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I did law, so I was really a words guy. I mean, I understand words, I know how to use words, I know how to write words, but when it came to numbers, I was not a numbers guy. And I got parachuted into the derivatives structuring kind of, you know, group in 1991, and I mean, I was just all at sea. But it turned out, and there was a time when I just thought, I just can't do this. It's just, you know, this is not my world. But actually, it turned out that what I was good at doing was, once I'd understood a concept, I could explain a concept to someone else who didn't understand it. So there were all these kind of, they were usually French. I don't know Goldman, but where I was, French, and they were just like, you know, it's not very hard, you know, you just have to you just integrate between X and Y, and you discover that the square root is, and it basically, and I don't know what you're talking about, and I would just say this, and I just take it, and then I'd explain it, and the customer would be like, okay, that makes sense, let's do it. So I found my little kind of niche, and being able to explain ideas and kind of, you know, explain, if you did this, then this is what would happen. I found my little, you find your space, right, Tracy? I don't know about you, but I found my space and my niche in an ecosystem that was really, you know, way more complex than anything that I was really suited for. But I managed to find my little niche.
Exactly right.
Yeah. And then also solving problems. I found that I could fix stuff, right? If something was broken, you find a way to fix it. And it turns out that that's actually quite a powerful thing, you know, if that's going to be your secret power, or your superpower, then fixing stuff is a good, if you're going to have one, that's not a bad one to have. And you find out over time, it takes 5-10 years.
It doesn't happen in the first year. And I think that's the other message, is you're not all going to know, even in the first year, what you want to do. Sometimes it takes 5 years. I mean, I had no idea. is the honest answer until 5 or 6 years into it.
Yeah. Now, listen, I want to ask you about being a woman because as you know, this is the program it's called 10,000 Black Interns. So the clue is in the title. So we have literally thousands of young Black graduates and undergraduates who are starting in a world where it's primarily people who are white, right? So they've got to figure it out and find their way. And look, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it will be the norm. But right now, it's not. You're going to wake up, you're going to start your internship and there's maybe just you in the whole room. There must have been times when you were the only woman in the room, and you're at a dinner, you're the only woman at a dinner, or you're in a conference call, it's just you. I mean, how have you coped with?
What do you mean there were times? It's like my life.
Oh, okay.
It hasn't changed. I mean, you said in 5 years' time, it'll be the norm. Saying that, if you look at our workforce, it's incredibly diverse. I mean, incredibly diverse, like across the spectrum, really. So that is very good. But when you get to the senior levels, the senior female, I think there's a generational change that needs to happen. For me to get to where I am, I had to start 25 years ago in a different kind of place. But now all of you are starting now. So in 25 years time, it should be, I wouldn't say it's 5 years. It's like more like 20 or 25 years. Then you're going to see a change. No, my life is a boardroom where it's me and 20 men.
What do you say to yourself when you walk in and you're like, oh, okay. I mean, are you like,
I don't even notice it.
Don't even notice it.
So, it doesn't even cross my mind anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
It doesn't even cross my mind.
Did it ever cross your mind? Was it ever a thing? Were you always, and how did you do that? Was it your upbringing? But how did you just walk in and be like, okay, this is me? And,
I honestly don't know. I honestly have no idea. I just went, yes, let's be clear. There have been many times over my career, mostly in the early years, where there was a lot of sexism. There was a lot of the Me Too stuff, all of that stuff happened. Of course it did. Yeah, of course it did. But actually, the world is a difficult place. And sometimes, as you say, you just need to put one foot in front of the other and just keep going. So you shrug it off and you go, yeah, okay, move on. Because if you know what you want to do, what your goals are, you just can't let any of that stand in your way, because that's just the way the world is.
So what would your advice be then to people who might find themselves the only whatever in the room? I mean, what's a narrative to oneself that helps you just to be like, this is what it is, and I'm going to be amazing and show them what I can do?
Oh God, when I walk into a room, and it doesn't matter who it is, I kind of look at the room and realize that every single one of those people has their own problems, and I go, I know he's not, if I don't really want to talk about my board now, but if you look at my board, you go, well, I know he's not very good at X, Y, and Z, and he's got problems there, and, and she's da-da-da. And I know that, there's no ideal. Certainly nobody's normal, by the way. Nobody's normal. Yeah. And everybody's got their own stuff to deal with. So just because you happen to be different in one way, somebody else across the room will be different in a completely other way. Let's take our business. It's a very complex technical business. And we've got some people on our board who are not very complex technical people. Right. So I know they feel outgunned by others on the board because they're the people who might understand risk or the regulatory system, whatever it is. So everybody has different things to bring to the party. And just because you're different in one way doesn't mean somebody else isn't different in another way. And I think just recognizing that everybody's different, just in different ways, kind of really, to me, has always helped. I mean, I honestly don't think about it.
Yeah, that's a really important point, because I've often been not the only guy in the room, obviously, but I've often been the only non-white person in the room, or certainly the only Black guy in the room. And I went 30 years and never really thought, it is what it is, kind of thing.
It is what it is.
It is what it is, but not everyone thinks that way. And also in the last maybe 4 or 5 years, I sort of think about it more and just think, you know what, this needs to change, right? Which is, of course,
definitely needs to change.
Yeah.
Definitely needs to change. Yeah. But part of it is, so you're not, when you walk into that room and you might be the only Black person there or the only female person there, whatever it is, you just go, look, all these people have different things, and they're all feeling insecure in different ways too. You know, I think that's one of the things I've learned over the years is everybody's insecure about something.
Yeah,
you know, just don't know what it's going to be.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm going to do some, I've got 4 minutes, and look, we're just blowing through the time. I knew it was going to be fabulous. I'm going to do some quick fire stuff, right? So this is like quick fire answers. So
oh God,
what about a book? Any books that you recommend? They say if someone was just going to go out and get a book, have you read anything recently that you would say, you know what, that's the book that I'd recommend you go?
Nah, not really. What I am absolutely addicted to is Audible. So I listen to a lot of books on tape. I like all the time.
And what kind of books do you listen to?
Everything. I listen to. It's a whole mix. It's the same thing as my reading. I always have 3 or 4 books on the go. So I mean, like, quite honestly, crappy crime novels like Jack Reacher sort of stuff, and on to you know, everything. So I've got a history book going. I think I've got Sapiens going somewhere. I've got different things going because you don't know what mood you're going to be in at the time.
Yeah, and everything informs. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Agreed. Then Daniel says, hey, hi Tracy, I am looking forward to starting with Pick next month.
Yay! Oh, hey. Great.
Brilliant.
Can't wait.
Yeah, and I'm curious for your insight. How can I best add value as an intern and go the extra mile? Okay, so Daniel's looking for some inside top tips before he even arrives.
Oh dear, I don't know. Yeah, you know, just get, you know, be open, be friendly, and really just be enthusiastic and get involved. That's really all you need to do. We wouldn't ask anybody to do anything that you know, that they're not set up to do. So we're not gonna, you know, it's about building your confidence and knowledge and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, you know, just throw yourself into it and kind of have a good time as well.
Are you guys nice and friendly, Tracy? I mean,
we're very nice and friendly.
Yeah,
we're well known for being very friendly.
Okay, we like that. Okay. Now someone else basically is asking about how do you showcase your skill set? Your interview is really kind of short, and so what do you look for when you're interviewing someone? You know, it's like, I don't know how long it is, but it's not that long, right? How do you, what are you looking for to think that's someone, you know, I like that. There's something about them. What sort of stuff jumps off the page for you?
So for me, especially because most of the people I am interviewing are going to be quite senior levels.
Yeah.
I think EQ, emotional intelligence, is actually incredibly important. And so I'm always kind of looking for that. And I probably don't actually consciously think about it that way, but that is kind of what I'm looking for. Because if you're very senior, you have to, you know, you're going to be managing lots of people. So emotional intelligence is quite important. It's just part and parcel of everything. So it is quite important. Obviously, fit with the rest of the team is incredibly important. And so, yeah, but showcasing skills, I don't know. You know, you are what you are, and I've always told everybody, especially the women, you know, you need to be yourself. And if you ever try to be somebody you're not, that's when it blows up in your face. If there's one thing I learned, and I learned it too late, to be honest, it is all about being yourself. It is that when I started being myself is when I really started succeeding. Before that, I was just trying to be somebody else's version of myself.
Yeah, I love that. So it's interesting, right? I mean, let me ask you this, Tracy. This is a bit off script, but let me, I mean, because you'd think that to be a successful CEO as a woman, do you have to be like more alpha than the men? I mean, or do you, I mean, or what, how does it? You do. Okay. So what is,
it's still the case. You have to be better. You have to be better.
Okay. But no sharp elbows, but you don't have to be more kind of like, you know, shouting.
No, you don't have to be sharp elbows. Just have to be better.
You have to be better. Okay. Well, that's quite interesting. That's
still the case, I'm afraid, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit.
I think it's changing. I do think it's changing. But again, too slowly, and that, yeah.
Fascinating. Well, listen, we've got to wrap, but I want to ask you a last thing, which is about what gets you out of bed. What do you care about now? You know, you've achieved great success. You've shown the industry the way to do what you do, and values, and, you know, finance with a purpose. What do you care about? What is, you know, when you wake up, you're like, got to deal with this thing. This is what I really care about. This is what drives me.
Apart from the 14-year-old son and the husband and the dogs and everything, so
apart from that,
that's usually first thing on my mind. The second thing is that, you know, what we are as we build an organization, we've been very clear, and we've done a lot of work on something called the purpose of finance. You'll find it all on our website. And it's about reconnecting finance with society, because the finance industry doesn't always have the best reputation, and it should, because it is absolutely integral to all of our lives and everything we do. You know, we integrate with the finance industry on a daily basis. It's really important. So we're spending a lot of time now thinking about the next stage and how our assets and investments, you know, it was a £50 billion portfolio and growing, how that can actually make a difference. So we're, you know, if you think about what we do, we do a lot of investments in things that are really beneficial for the next generation in terms of infrastructure, social housing, universities, green energy, all of that sort of stuff. And it's a form of intergenerational transfer. So building those things and doing the right thing from that perspective is really important to kind of how I see the legacy of the business in the future. When I'm not there, you know, I'm not always going to be there.
Yeah. Well, look, I just want to say thank you again, Tracy. You're amazing, and you know, I've always been blown away by everything that you've turned your hand to and everything that you've achieved. And thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to talk to us. It's just so inspiring. And again, I know you're super busy, and I know you've got kids and a business, and you know, yeah. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I know everyone, it's all blowing up in the chat. Thank you, Tracy. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. It's all, you know, lots of smiles, and maybe we'll have you back on at some point. And
love to. Yeah, well, good luck all of you in your internships as well. I mean, just throw yourself in, really get involved, and be enthusiastic. It'll be great, you know, and just be yourself. You'll be fantastic.
Yeah, totally. And then, you know, they're going to look back, you know, just like you've done 25 years time, and you know, hopefully changing the world and running their own firm, their own thing. So thank you, Tracy. You're a rock star. You're amazing. Love you to bits.
Delighted.
Ciao. Thank you.
Ciao. See ya.
Bye.